Um, well, most people, there's a couple of things here. First of all, it wasn't even on the radar that China could have a sort of slowdown where we actually see negative GDP. Well, GDP being the sort of measure of economic activity in the country. People were talking about a recession in China being a sort of 5% GDP, which for the U.S. would be great numbers these days. But in fact, they're talking about it falling off a cliff. And the problem is that it's not just China. I mean, China has been the sort of locus of activity in Asia, and Taiwan output there and production has fallen off a cliff. They were obviously a big trading partner with China as well as the rest of the world. We're seeing similar developments in the whole region. I mean, everybody. It was very much a symbiotic relationship between China and its neighbors in that part of the world. And all of the bulls once argued, well, that's one reason why Asia is going to keep powering ahead, even if the U.S. goes down the tubes. Well, the reality is that Asia is very dependent on China, and China is very dependent on the U.S. And now the sort of the chain is essentially breaking down.
Mm-hmm. Take it down to a personal level for my listeners. What can people do to attempt to protect themselves best they can?
Well, clearly it depends somewhat on your circumstances and where you're located. I mean, there's many issues here. I think lifestyle and attitude adjustment are top of the list. I mean, the first thing you have to do is accept the reality that this is not some short-term blip. I mean, this is the new normal is a term that I've heard before, and I think certainly applies. The world is not going to be expanding like we saw before. Under those circumstances, I mean, the obvious things are to sort of pay down debt, to live within your means, to adjust your spending habits, to reevaluate your relationships. But then, if you want to go beyond that to sort of investments, well, it becomes a little bit of a tricky thing, because I think in the short run, there's still going to be some pressures related to the economic downturn and deflation, where people are selling things because they have too much debt, and it tends to depress prices of assets. But longer term, I mean, one of the bull cases I make, and I think it will be perhaps one of the few investment options, but potentially a profitable one, is precious metals. I think in the kind of scenario I see where people are losing faith in currency, but are also scared about a changing geopolitical reality, there's going to be a flight to traditional havens, and in my mind, gold and silver and platinum, as a group, are going to be a place to hide.
It's already underway. Gold's what now, up near 1,000 somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah. And to be honest, I'm a little concerned that you could find some people selling gold, speculators who sort of took on all the leverage to buy them in the short run. So maybe you can get it cheaper, but long run, it's a 5 or a 10 bagger at least. So
one way to take advantage of the current situation is to dive into gold or into precious metals, in your opinion.
Yes, but it's got to be part of a broader thing. I mean, the truth is that, and again, I talk about in When Giants Fall, is certain parts of the country are going to become unlivable.
Unlivable.
Yeah, I mean, because of, for example, water issues, and because of the changing energy picture, and because of the housing market bust. I mean, it's going to leave ghost towns in certain suburban areas. I think there's going to be as a matter of survival, so to speak, and I don't mean living in caves. I just mean this sort of euphemistically, but of moving towards areas where people are going, and that's probably going to be smaller towns. It's going to be small to mid-sized cities, and away from the sort of suburban, wastelands, which I think are going to be dotting the landscape.
Suburban wastelands. In other words, in order to get products and services to people, they're going to have to leave these comfortable suburbs and go back to the masses in the cities.
Yeah, people will have to be more, come together and localize is the term that I use, and others certainly came up with it before me. But we're going back to a sort of more localized world because of these various economic pressures, but as well as resource pressures, as well as, people are used to sort of infrastructure working, roads working. There's all this talk about stimulus fixing that, but in truth, the amount of money and the state of disrepair of water systems and sewage systems and electrical grids and all of this, I mean, it's at a point of criticality in many cases, and you may find that you have to go somewhere by virtue of the fact that it has clean running water, because you can't get it in other places because the water treatment plants are breaking down.
God, that's pretty dire. Michael, the American people have had it pretty good for a long, long time. If things get, as you're suggesting, they may get wastelands in the suburbs, that kind of thing. You remember the old rat experiment where you put a bunch of rats together and they sort of eat each other alive. If things really, really get as rough as you're suggesting, what sort of social difficulties do you envision as possible?
Well, my single biggest fear is another world war, and I actually believe that the risks of that happening over the next decade are fairly high. I mean, nobody likes war. I mean, but war is a natural offshoot of building, of first of all, resource constraints. People eating each other. You do that because you essentially run out of what you need.
Right.
But I think the kinds of pressures that will build up will create a lot of social unrest, and it will create a lot of geopolitical unrest, or I guess instability is probably a better term. But there's going to be reasons for countries to take it upon themselves to get in fights with other countries, and then meanwhile you've got all these other operators coming in, terrorists, etc. They're all going to play on the changing scenario.
All right, hold it right there, Michael. When we come back, I'm going to open the line so you can start dialing now. Michael J.